Hello, everybody. Hello, this is Berlin. I'm very pleased to see a lot of people that I know and a lot of people that I don't know in the audience. And we will start with our value cast right now. And it's called Quo Vadis MT. And I'm just sharing my screen to... Yes, I hope you can see my screen now. Is that good? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Welcome on this sunny day in Europe. We are talking about machine translation, and we are talking first of all about the history of machine translation. But first of all, I would like to introduce my colleagues. First of all, is Dr. John Tinsley, whose entire career was related to machine translation, and still is, of course. He's from Ireland. His own company, Iconic Machine Translation, which in itself was always iconic, set a lot of standards in machine translation. Now that Iconic has been sold to RWS, we will welcome John as Managing Director of Iconic RWS. And from him, we want to know what is next in MT and what are the standards that MT gone through up to now. Secondly, I would like to introduce a good friend of mine and colleague, Konstantin Dranch, from the Czech Republic, from Prague right now, originally from Russia. He's one of the finest researchers in language technology here in Europe. And he just founded a company called Custom MT, and we want to know what is behind that and what he's aiming at this solitary business model. Third, last not least, we have Frederick. We have Frederick Patterson on the panel, CEO and founder of Easy Translate, co-founder of Easy Translate in Denmark, Copenhagen. Welcome to you, Frederick. Here we are especially interested in knowing and learning how MT fits into the portfolios, the product portfolios of a standard LSP today. Having said that, I will just give you a quick overview, and this leads me to the history of MT. MT is has his base in the cryptography of the Second World War. So after that, everybody was interested in language-related items. Of course, knowing Russia, translating Russia automatically to the US military, and therefore it was all, you know, they made up a committee, the Automatic Language Processing Advisory Committee, founded that in the 50s, and in the 60s they came to the conclusion in their final report, there is no such thing as a working machine translation, and it probably never will. I myself know it better now, but because I was born in 1966, so I didn't hear that, and we of course know now what machine translation can do and what it did in the last years. If we're going to the history, we see things like example-based and rule-based MT. We see expressions like syntax-based MT, and we would like to learn a little more about that, and of course about neural machine translation. And maybe John can give us a little idea about where this all comes from. What, for example, was rule-based MT, and how did it lead to neural MT today, and what are the definitions? Maybe John, you can give us a little 2 minutes on that.
Sure. I was going to say, I'll try to keep it to 2 minutes because it's a question that you could you could answer for quite a long time. Yeah, we broadly define MT in paradigms. Like you've said, there's rule-based, statistical, and neural. Rule-based was the dominant one for many decades, and essentially it is what it says on the tin. You would write rules that reflected how grammars differed between two languages to transform sentences, and then you'd use dictionaries to change the words. Not super sophisticated. You needed qualified linguists who were fluent in the grammars of both languages to write that, so it didn't scale and it didn't really work very well, essentially. So the paradigm shifted late 80s, early 90s to statistical machine translation, which is based on machine learning. Effectively, it's all based on counting, how frequently certain things translate as other things. So the ideas came from speech recognition as well. It worked quite well for that. So they said, let's try translation. So first they counted words, then they counted phrases, then they started to add syntactic information onto those phrases. This is a noun phrase, this is a verb phrase. But effectively, the technology was broadly the same. The algorithms behind the scenes, and it kind of plateaued in the, I'm going to say, know what we call it, the tens, around that kind of time, and then we had the next kind of paradigm shift to neural MT. And essentially what that is, it's just a change in the algorithms on the back end. We still have data, we still train systems, and we still look at how frequently things occur together, but we do it in a much more sophisticated way. And the algorithms, the core algorithms underlying neural networks are not necessarily new things, but it's just the fact that computers caught up with the ability to process data at the scale that it needed to do this. So that's effectively it. And then where we are with neural MT is it's okay, we apply generic algorithms and now we're going to try to make them more specific to the task of translation. And as I'm sure most people have seen, it's working quite well.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much for that. And before I will hand over to you anyway, I would just want the audience to know what MT is doing today. I mean, today we are right. Yeah, thank you. So what we know today is that MT is here, and MT is here to stay. Of course, it's not only part of our daily life as we work with languages, but it's also part of everybody's life. I mean, if we look at the facts, I think they are from 2018, so they are a little old, but it's okay. Google Translate processes at least 200 billion words every day. Amazon translates 200 billion words on a daily basis, and Alibaba exceeds 300 billion translated words per day. So what does that mean? That means it's just a lot of consumers use machine translation today to get hold of content that they want to understand. In contrast, what is one of the largest LSPs, language solution providers, that we have in the world is SDL, and SDL translates 200 billion words in human translation a year, but also on a yearly basis, it used to translate or process 300 billion words on a yearly basis. So this gives you an idea about what consumers usage is right now, what business usage is right now, and what we are probably aiming at in the next years, because as I understand, we will have a lot more of machine processed translations within the next 5 or 10 years. Having said that, I would like to hand over to John, and he will give us an idea about machine translation today.
Thank you. So let me just share my screen. Okay, I'm gonna guess everyone can see that now. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, first of all, thanks to Arthur and Philippe and the LT Innovate team for the invitation to speak today. I finished school. I started school probably just before or just after they stopped teaching Latin as a subject in Ireland. So I will admit that when I saw the title of this webcast, I didn't know what it meant. So I looked it up. And it turns out it means, where are you going? Machine translation. So you see my response on the screen there. I'll leave it up to you to work out what the translation is of that. But when you ask that question, where are you going, MT, it sounds suspiciously like a request for a prediction. And as Arthur said, I've been on the MT beat since 2002, first as an academic, then as a researcher, R&D, up to the level of commercialization. And I've seen a lot of egg on people's faces when trying to make predictions about MT. Arthur referred back to this Russian to English experiments in the early days in the 50s. This was known as the Georgetown experiment. And they predicted that within 3 to 5 years that machine translation would be solved. And then, as you saw, their colleagues 10 years later said, this will never work. So everyone gets predictions wrong in this space, but nevertheless, we'll have a stab at answering the question. So I think before we can answer the question, there are a couple of things we need to look at first, and some maybe questions that need to be asked in advance. And the first question there is, who is your master when it comes to machine translation? Who are you serving with the MT? Who's your customer or your user? What's their use case? Because this is going to have a fundamental impact on things. So if we think about machine translation for post-editing in the traditional localization workflow, machine translation for other things like gisting, content intelligence, or communication, they're 100% totally distinct use cases, different set of users, different set of requirements, and the MT will offer different levels of value to them, and that will have an impact on how much people are willing to pay for MT. For instance, we've already seen consumers from a B to C perspective are conditioned that MT is a free tool now. So who you're actually providing it to and for what use is going to have a big implication on your business models. I think I saw a car analogy used in someone's description of this webcast. So to build on that, for example, if you're building and selling motor engines, not only are you going to have a different technology if you're building those engines for cars or for tractors or for planes, but you're going to have a different model around how you sell them in terms of the scale of the operation, how many of them you build, how quickly, how you sell them, and things like that as well. And when it comes to machine translation from a technology perspective, product, commercialization standpoint, you need to take all of that into account as well. If you're providing MT for post-editing, you need to strap in for that. And all we know it entails around focus on fine details in terms of quality, finding equitable pricing models in the supply chain, a lot of training and evangelization. On the other hand, if you're providing or building MT for what we call MT only use cases, you got to hit the books and learn about your customers and their problems and build solutions specifically for that. If you're going to try to do both, good luck. You better be good, because there's going to be a lot on your plate in that regard. And I guess in probably what's a bit of an exclusive for this webcast and LT Innovate, that's the nut that we're trying to crack at the moment. So Arthur mentioned SDL earlier on. So my iconic MT team is joining forces with the SDL MT team under the RWS banner. And we're going to be looking at both of those challenges, the operationalization of MT and also the productization of it. But more on that another day. So where are we going? I think to look at where we're going, we need to take a look back at where we've been and where we currently are. So in the past, MT wasn't very good. We tried to find a place for it. We tried to shoehorn it into translators, workflows, but in the majority of cases, it didn't really help. And when it did, it was often for a small set of languages, maybe for some very specific, easy use cases like translating weather forecast. And no doubt this has stained MT's reputation. And it's a challenge today still to shake off those perceptions. You still get a lot of eyes being rolled at MT because, after all, you can only really make one first impression. So that was MT in the past, but today MT is as good as it's ever been. I guess you'd hope so. It shouldn't be getting worse, but it's more widely used than it's ever been as well, as we saw in the numbers from Artur. A lot of its use is in areas where we've thought of before, but it wasn't good enough. And so now you can kind of look at it like a massive global rollout now that we've cracked that quality nut to some extent. So in many cases, that might be expanding across the languages. So maybe it worked in the past for 5 languages. Now it will work for 50 languages. Some of them are use cases we thought before, but it didn't work. And now we can try it in those use cases like customer support and things like that that are quite popular. And in the future, I think the important question is, what more can it do? And what haven't we thought of yet? And in my humble opinion, the future of MT doesn't just involve the T part. The future of machine translation doesn't just involve the translation piece. It's what you can do with the content possibly before it goes into the MT, and then critically, what happens to the content after it has been machine translated. We call this MT++ or beyond MT. But I'll stop there for a second and to go and look at the translation part, because I think that's important firstly to look at, because there has been, or there seems to be, quite a big drive to commoditize this technology. That kind of view of, don't worry about which engine you're going to use, we'll find the best one and you'll be fine. And that might work in few cases, but that won't scale at enterprise level for heavy users, because at that level it's not a question of being an engine provider. I think that's a reductive way of describing it. It's about being solution providers, and the reason for that is when it comes to the MT itself, an MT solution is not just a tool that you put words into in one language and it comes out in the other language, because what if those words come out wrong? What if the words aren't coming out fast enough? What if the words stop coming out? What if some of the words that go in need to go into an EU version of the solution, or a US version of the solution, or a solution on your computer? And so that's partly why I say it's about more than just translation when it comes to the technology. It's about the bigger package. And then when we look at business models, I think I saw a description as well of this webcast asking the question, how do you make money from MT? Which I think is a slightly crass way to put it. I think rather it's a question of looking for the right business model so that it's a win-win for the seller and the buyer. The seller makes profit, the buyer's happy because they get value. And the way to do that is to make MT part of a process that solves a problem. You add the value yourself with your product and your service, and you get it in front of customers. And that's not building APIs and giving access to them. An API is not a product. That's building interfaces. That's having an ecosystem of integrations. That's the infrastructure your service is built on. That's your customer support, your consultation, and your expertise, because the customer isn't really interested in tools and technologies. At the end of the day, they don't necessarily care whether you're using transformer models or BERT or byte pair encoding. They're interested in solutions to their problems. So I think that's the first thing in terms of what we need to do with the translation part. And if we look at the beyond MT part, I think that's the future direction we're going. What happens to the content around the machine translation process? What happens to the words before they come to the machine translation? And what happens to the words after we machine translate them? And is there anything we can do as solutions providers, technology solution providers, to add value to that? To a very large extent, that's going to be dependent on the use case and the industry, but there are some obvious examples of that are more generally applicable that you might not even have realized. I think a good example here is, before translation, the task of automatic language detection or language identification. The problem there is the customer doesn't know what language their content is in. They don't care either. They just want it in a particular language. So you provide them the ability to do that. And there's dozens of examples like that, where you can add significant extra value on top of just machine translation technology. I'm not going to list them all, but to give you a flavor, if if the use case is gisting, you just machine translation for gisting, the user's trying to consume information. So you could possibly provide them more insight into the content that they've translated, provide them a summary of the documents. If they're translating a lot of documents, give them that kind of Reddit style, too long didn't read version of all of the documents that have just been translated. If people are machine translating documents so that they can search through them and review, try to find specific pieces of information, try to provide them that information, highlight certain entities, whether it's people's names or companies or drugs, and support them in effectively what's a multilingual search task. Other tasks can be monitoring, real-time monitoring of different types of inputs like audio, text, so audio in phone calls, text in emails, and detecting certain activity or mentions of certain things. That's quite common in the financial industry, for example. So, like I said, there are many of these. Some of them are super specific to certain industries and use cases. So I used the term earlier on to hit the books. That's something that you really need to do to understand the problem before you can solve it. So back to the original question of Quo Vadis MT, I'm not 100% sure where it's gone. I have a pretty good idea. So I would encourage you to stay tuned to hopefully find out. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. That was pretty cool, and it gave us an idea about how powerful machine translation, but as well that machine translation is only a part in a process which is complicated and very complex. So the main business that, for example, an LSP is running is not too much endangered by MT. Unless you recognize there is MT and we have to work with it and work with it smart. So I'm very thankful for your presentation here. And well, before we start talking, I'll just hand over to Konstantin. Konstantin, it's your turn.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, John.
All right. So before I start, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know, I'm not very familiar with WebEx, but I think you can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
I saw some nods, so I believe this is
see
a
the
yes.
small one.
Right. Would you mind writing in the chat if you represent the buy side or the vendor side? And maybe I'll tailor my presentation to you as we go. Afa asked me to prepare a little bit about the trends and a little bit about what I do, this new business model. I hope to satisfy your curiosity to the best of my ability. From my point of view, what's going in MT is that it's becoming a game for everyone. It used to be a playground for research scientists first, symbolized by that person here. Then developers who put APIs, connectors to MTE and made it easy to integrate in different systems. What's going on today after the age of NMT is the age where there is a gigantic class of people using MT. It's for project managers in translation companies. It's for language teams on the buy side. It's for thousands of applications that use MT for whatever purposes. Information monitoring, subtitle translation, you name it. Just what is going on in MT, it's becoming much bigger, and there are many more specialists in that area who were never a part of MT game, like me. I was always a researcher, someone who observed the industry. I did a few of researches in the machine translation area, realized how small that market is. And somehow, 7 months ago, I partnered up and decided, all right, let's build a company. So I'm working now with a team of almost 10 people. And I can't believe how incredibly short and how incredibly vivid this journey has been in this past few months. So machine translation is now the game for people who manage projects, manage language technology, and manage their children jumping in the background because it's lockdowns. The simple way for an LSP to adopt machine translation these days is just to take whatever is available in the cattle. If you're using, if you're based in Germany, then probably you're using SDL with deeply integrated in it. If you're in the United States, like the survey participants here from the American Association, then you're using Google or Microsoft. You can always use Google or Microsoft here. So this is the easy path, and everyone's doing that. If you're not doing it yet, you're losing money, you're leaving it out for someone else, money on the table. The hard part is to go beyond that and to build a whole service around MT. I know Nander is in the audience today, so Nander, I'm going to quote you here. To give you an example, Nander runs a machine translation team which is connected with the language team at the buy side. So in his team, he has 6 people working on 80 machine translation engines, training them, customizing them, improving them, getting data, making sure it works. So it's a whole machine translation team in the enterprise. Probably Nander has more machine translation engines than linguists, or a comparable number. Lamis, we ran a webinar together a couple of months ago, runs a team of 6 machine translation specialists inside an LSP. Every LSP that wants to be in the game is now creating a machine translation trainer team. Developers, program managers, project managers who operate the engines. So this is the path to take it to the next level. And finally, some LSPs are packaging machine translation into a product or a service, and the buyer doesn't buy machine translation, they buy something else. So Unbabel Language.io listed here, they provide multilingual customer support, ticket translation, chat translation, so that a support agent in the Philippines or India can answer the questions of a buyer in Germany or Denmark. And of course, one person supporting, I don't know, 100 people in Denmark costs the same as probably 15 people in the Philippines. So what's better? To have 15 people in the centralized shift after shift in the Philippines, supporting Denmark with just one person in Denmark? It's a good question. It will be answered by the revenue of these 2 companies. So you can package MT, you can build the team around it, you can go the extra mile to really become a part of this industry and make your career or make your business here. Many things are going to change. I think it's a table that is too long to read. Have a look. What I'm saying here is that it's going to grow. It's going to be many more people, many more applications, and much more automated than now. The tools for usual machine translation are all right. The tools for customized, tailored machine translation are in the infancy, and they are growing now. All these trainers who are coming to the market, machine translation specialists, they're screaming, they're crying for one thing: more tools to do MT in a streamlined way. And this is going to come to the market very soon. Now, what my company does, it trains any type of technology, Google, Microsoft, Globally, Pangenic, you name it. Yandex, IBM, we partnered up with Chinese companies, European companies, American companies, worked with Amazon ACT team. So we train all kinds of custom engines with the translation memory and the terminology of LSPs and of language teams on the buy side. We focus on the language industry. We trained about 70 engines so far for buyers. Some went with great aplomb, some were not as successful. Let me show you some of the examples of what we got through training. Is it worth it? When we run human evaluations and we give a blind test to a group of translators on the buyer side and ask them to say, what do you think about this translation, that translation, in a streamlined methodological way? I know John doesn't like our way, and he criticized it explicitly on LinkedIn. Thank you for that, John. It helped us improve our service. Please continue. Anyway, what I want to say here is that in this kind of methodology, in this scenario, when people say, all right, this segment is perfect, no need to edit it, this segment needs slight edits, this segment is garbage. It is not uncommon for customized machine translation applied to a technical text, text or financial text or medical text, for the machine to beat man. it's very often that we see that for editing purposes, machine translation provides better results than the human translation. It wins in the view in the eyes of the translators on the side of the LSP or the buyer who evaluate it. They don't know which one's which. They don't know where's Google, where's Globalese, where's Amazon and Morden. All they see is the number of phrases translated supposedly by some machines, and one of them is not a machine, it's human. Very often we see that it's better to translate with the customized machine translation engine than with the machine. So that leaves very little for review. So in this scenario, 20% segments here need reviewing from the point of view of the evaluators. That happens quite often. Sometimes the evaluators are more strict, and then we see like this type of picture, right? Something like half of the segments need review or deeper. Sometimes the evaluators are more optimistic and they just put more 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, and then we roll them out. So we have a methodology to see how good their feedback is. Here there's an example how it looks like. I don't speak German, you do, but you can see that the trained engine from MordMT, an Italian company, is much closer to the human translation here than untrained. So after training, the product names, the terminology is accurate, and if you're dealing with a situation such as support where you need terminology accurate, this is essential. You can understand what's going on. If it says push this button, the name of the button will be translated correctly. There is a Russian option for those who speak Russian here, and we track how it changes. For editing, for professional LSP work, that means that a single post editor can do the work of 6 translators. We can routinely see that they achieve scores between 1,000 words and 1,500 words per hour, not for a very long stretch of time, but they can be much more efficient than those translators not supported with MT. So what's the benefit of training? Save some budget, use it for something else, maybe translate more, maybe translate something without any human in the loop, because people are starting to ask, can we use machine translation trained, tailored, without data, without checking? You can, but if you're ready to face the risks. Some types of content are not risky, so you can go. And then finally, you can have a bot which understands fartlex, whatever that means. Here are some things about how we work. This is our workflow with training, integration, LQA, workshops for people. Basically, we make trained MT easy for the buyer, for the LSP. They don't need to build a big department. They can have a buyer, they can have a head of production, plus us, and that connects into an efficient MT service. And this is the team which I built with my partner Philip. We have trainers, data analysts, a few people who knows Python, they scripted some stuff with RPA. I'm not dealing with that. My partner, who is running the production, is doing more of that. And we have some PMs and lexicographers who work with the console systems, credit cards, and all the problems that arise. This is an example how we clean up the translation memory. We call it a dataset health report. How we approach LQA and how we track segments which drop during training so we can heal them up later. And the examples of problems that we have to deal with when we try to connect machine translation engines which are trainable with CAT tools that don't want to work with trainable MT engines. So we take care of all these challenges. Sometimes there is a hassle, sometimes it takes 2 weeks, but we're getting there. So if you are here to start with machine translation, I think most of us here are already experts in machine translation. I'm just preaching to converts. There are many use cases. Post-editing is a small part of what machine translation does. Information monitoring, chats, catalogs, big volume translations is where machine translation excels. There are many stakeholders inside the companies that machine translation helps. Not only language teams, but product teams, support teams, marketing teams, and information security. You can come up with more compliance teams. whistleblowers, whatever. Everyone can benefit in some way. So if the language team manages the machine translation engines, they can expand their influence across different stakeholders inside the organization. For the LSP, the pivotal moments when they can start implementing machine translation is the situation when the client poses some unrealistic demands for price and time. So this is typically the case when machine translation becomes very, very urgent, and then people start thinking, all right, let's do something about that. Second case is when there is a professional client who wants MT, who understands they should be in MT, especially with their volume and the amount of translations they do, and then they ask, train an engine for me. And I know many LSPs now train engines for their buyers. It's not only SDL, RWS, it's anyone. Accolade, LanguageWire, Semantics, you name it. Everyone is training engines. Now, if you want to build your internal team, many tools now on the market, frameworks that could be connected to build a data pipeline. Some of them are ready, some of them are not. We have some information about this. If you're interested, there is a bigger version of this infographic. And if you don't want to deal the hassle, then you can apply to one of the suppliers. There's Samuel Laubli in the room who is training engines for buyers. I'm sure there are more specialists like us who train custom engines. Final thing to advertise today is a big conference called MT Summit 21 in the United States. If you're interested in all the latest developments, I recommend that you put this conference on your radar and learn more about the business models, how you can sell MT, raw MT, post-edited MT, MT integrated with another application such as speech. So that would be the place to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Konstantin. That was pretty good. It was giving us an idea about how the quality of MT gives sets a new standard versus human translation. And I'm very interested about later when we have the Q&A what John's going to reply on that test that Konstantin was referring to. But right now we have, last not least, we have Frederick, and I'm very happy to have you here. Not only because Copenhagen is one of my favorite cities, but but now we're going to learn about how this will affect the business model of a more or less standard. I know that you're a young company, but how this affects the business models of LSP who's running business for a while now. So, Frederick,
thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I'll just share my screen here. 1 second. Could you just, is it working? Great, perfect. Okay. So first of all, thanks a lot everyone for having me here today. I'm extremely happy to be invited. My name is Frederick Patterson and I'm the co-founder of Easy Translate. And I'm here to talk a little bit about how MT can be incorporated in a general business model, and at least how Easy Translate have been and is working with machine translation. So I hope it will give some helpful insights for everyone here. So just a little bit about Easy Translate first of all. Easy Translate was started back in 2010, so it's actually a long time ago now. Back then, we I think were one of the first digital LSPs or translation agencies. But over the past year, we have been through a kind of a transformation, and we look at ourselves in a bit different way. So not the traditional LSP outro in this sense, but probably more a combination of a TMS system and a marketplace with translators. So the reason for this position in the market at least we believe in that the importance and the success lays in the collaboration between the customers and the translators. So by facilitating actually kind of a universe or platform for both the customers and the translator to collaborate under full transparency. And here we are not only talking about transparency in matter of being able to chat and talk with them, but also in matter of training, pricing, and I mean, beyond that and more, is extremely important for the general quality. And we definitely believe that this is also part of the success we have been through the past years, where we have been in different ratings as the fastest growing or part of the fast growing LSPs in the world. So of course, a big part of this year also lays in the whole transformation. So in I think it was about a year time ago, we actually launched our new product, Language as a Service. So Language as a Service is a way of kind of like looking into to facilitating the new way of being a LSP in our understanding at least. So what does this actually mean for the customer? So when we look at language as a service, we look at some essential or three essential parts. First of all, we look at onboarding. So when customers comes to Easy Translate, we see it as a extremely important part to actually understand the need of the customer, and I guess this would be the same for a lot of other competitor in the industry. But the difference within Easy Translate lays in the effort we put into actually creating training materials. So not all companies actually comes with a general translation strategy or localization strategy. Some actually is fast-growing companies where they need help to get the foundation. So here is how to set up a terminology term list. I mean, a whole strategy for the communication and external communication, and also training. So the way we have solved this is by creating a process for all customers to go through, and then they can actually adjust themselves how extended the process would be, a matter of course, the price of it. But we will support in a broad range also Easy Translate Academy, which is a training system to actually train your specific team of translators. We are part of the whole sourcing of the translators, and here we put a lot of effort into the transparency of the sourcing. So we prevent the full kind of like information about the translators that we have chose for this specific client, together with test translations, etc., and for the customer to select. And here the pricing is, of course, also a essential part. So we, in this business model, we have a complete transparent pricing. So the price of each translator is also visible for the customer at the time of choosing the translator, because as you all know, there's a big price difference between if you want to have generic product text translations and legal documentation translated. And sometimes it can be a bit hard to communicate that with customers because eventually economics is also part of purchasing translation. So that's why we have gone with a completely transparent pricing strategy. So all this here is of course important, but we have seen also as a must-have automation package, if you will. So actually put all this into a bundle where the self-service and the automation is of course 100%, and also where the whole machine translation and the training of MT Engine comes in. So so now I'll just kind of like show you how it works. So first of all, we put a lot of effort into actually not working with files. We would like to be where our customers' content are. So we have built over the past 6 months, I think, almost 10 plugins. Newly with beta version with Zapier. So generally, we strive to receive content and also deliver content back directly from where the content lives, if you will. the whole process here, and of course there's variations with extra revision steps, etc. That is not what we are focusing on today. Today we are focusing on the machine translation and the learning circle of this. So how we have put it together in Easy Translate is probably a bit different approach, and maybe I think John and Konstantin can maybe come with some reasons for that's not the best way, but anyway, I think from the research we have done, this is where we can see the best output comes to the customer with the least effort. So in general here, how we are processing it is that we run it through a generic machine translation. So I think it was the cat hole that Konstantin was referring to. So it could be Google Translate, DeepL, whatever. And hereafter we have the human editing. And pretty fast in the process, we see an extremely fast increase in our post-editing engine, which is actually kind of like doing proofreading of the machine translation output. So we don't create a full machine translation from scratch. We rather actually look at how can we improve the machine translation output from the learnings, both from the customer and the supplier. So the whole editing process is happening within our app, and the customers have the ability also to go in and give feedback. And all this here, I mean, the great thing about this is that we also support this on a €29 monthly subscription, where it's MT only, and then the customers can do their editing themselves and then learn from it. So this is extremely easy access for customers, and also benefiting a lot. Also back to the transparent pricing on how can customer and translator benefit from the improvement of what we call augmented machine translation. So this is a little bit about where we are today and how we work with machine today, translation today. But I have also taken the freedom to take some slides in about where we're hitting at. So I think John actually put some pretty nice words about what about around the machine translation. So in Easy Translate, we have in the past years been working on a new service that we expect to launch here in the spring 21. And the product is named Content as a Service, funny enough. And the whole idea is here that we actually look on the whole thing a bit in a different way, if you will. So first of all, we have had a lot of customers that came to us, and the biggest struggle for their side was to actually create the content for the products. So we are talking, for instance, of e-commerces with thousands of products coming in, and for them to create tailor-made unique content for each product is extremely time-consuming, and actually it has a big cost and even a bigger bottleneck than the actual localization of it. So that actually put us into a phase where we say, okay, what about actually creating content from the bottom? So in the past year, we have been through a training model where we actually have just launched the Zapier beta version, where the whole idea is that we can collect kind of like product features, if you will, and from those features generate a product description that we can deliver back again to the customer's PIM system or whatever they use in this matter. So all this here, the approach that we have kind of like working on have been like gathering, cleaning, and then formatting and putting all these kind of data pipelines.
Can't hear you anymore, Frederick.
We're having it's our kind of like our mission here is to actually be able to deliver 50 words, and it seems simple, but it's actually pretty hard, about products based on specific features. So here is, for instance, an example. So a given input from a customer could be that a Motorola phone with these kind of like specs, and this is what our engine then generates from it. So this here is we are at this point here, we are almost at a bit over 30 in the blue score, and we are working at kind of like raising it. And we expect that with the kind of like the growth and the current usage from the customers, we will be there in around summertime to actually have a more usable and more automated product without any kind of like human interactions. So that was it from our side. Of course, I would love to explain more if anyone is interested. My details is on the screen, or else I hope it gave a brief insight in how we need to translate work with machine translation, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Frederick. My spontaneous question was, first of all, I'm stunned about the CaaS, the content as a service product that you're planning. I knew already about the language as a service product, which I think is very good. Relating to the LAAS, the language as a service product, where do the clients edit? What if they're really on self-service, as far as I understand, how do they get their content?
They edit in the editor.
Oh, your own editor or in their editor?
Yes.
Your editor. So you have an editor built into the. Oh, that's good. Okay, cool.
Frederick,
Good.
how do you price text generation? We're running a trial ourselves with an IT company, and we're thinking by engine. Are you going by unit of content or by engine or subscription?
We at this point here, we don't know exactly yet how we will do it. I think it will be per product output, I would say.
Okay,
So
cool.
per product.
Yes, and then I think over time we'll go on characters.
The smaller the unit, the bigger the profit. I like that.
Okay, good. My basic question is, but I then afterwards I would like to open the Q&A round to all of you that are in the audience, and there are some people in the audience, and I hope that there are some questions. Is it really independent about what MT engine you use? I mean, somebody said it needs to be trained. Some said it doesn't matter what is the engine that needs to be trained. So is this really true? Because, well, taking the analogy of car builders, that might be a little problematic if you take whatever engine. Maybe somebody can give me a little can put a little light on that.
John, would you like to go, or
John?
I can also answer.
John, please. Oh well, you can do. I mean, John? Yes, John?
Go ahead, Constantine.
Right. So after the engines learn in a different way from the same data set. You give the same data set to 5 different engines, they learn by a different amount. 5% one, 100% another one. So it is actually very beneficial to train 5 or 7 or 10 and compare after. Most of the people in the industry first compare and then train the best one. We went with the other one to train everything. It's much more work, but in the end, you see a huge difference in the ways how the engines learn and how they adopt the content. Okay. And then after you've trained them, and only then when you evaluate, then you know that you have the best machine translation in the world for your type of content. Okay. That being said, some of the technologies, some of the brands, they use the same neural network, right? Many of the cars from different brands run on Mercedes-Benz engines, right? It will be a different brand of the car, but the same components. So 2 or 3 of the engines in the stack might learn in the same way. But overall, I would say first train, then evaluate, and it's a big difference.
Good. John?
I guess the one challenge with that is that evaluation is a point in time exercise, and engines are live things, especially if you have a real time adaptive engine that's actually improving with the feedback as well. So there's plenty of arguments to be made, and again, it'll be really depend on what the use case is and weighing up the cost benefit of doing the training versus what the training gives you. I think that's quite an important thing, because we have the same kind of concept. We have general purpose engines, we have three specific, and then we have engines that we can allow customers to train or that we will train as a service. But that training as a service is obviously, there's costs associated with that. But what are you using the output for, right? If that extra quality is not going to give you any extra benefits, or something that you can quantify, then there's a question of whether you even need to do that or not. So I think it's I guess that's why the likes of the Google and the Microsoft translations are, they're reasonably high out of the box and will be fit for a purpose for a swathe of use cases, including a lot of consumer stuff. And then I think then for any individual customer, depending on what's valuable to them, this is like I said when I spoke earlier on, what's valuable to them will kind of determine the approach you should take to training technologies or not.
What do you think, John, about incremental training, daily training? Now it's available in some of the brands. We see that the improvement day to day is tiny, and you shouldn't make an engine like a live thing. It's not that beneficial and it's risky. Do you see a different picture?
To be honest, again, I feel like I've been saying this for a decade, but the answer to most questions when it comes to MT is it depends, right? So it depends on, it depends on how good it is in the first instance, right? So if you have an engine that's trained on a lot of data and that's not being used very heavily, that kind of interactive process, it's not going to learn a lot more from it. It's just going to kind of reaffirm what it knows already. If you have an engine that's very far from what the user is using and you're doing that iterative training, it's not going to refine. So there will be various levels. And we've got kind of what we would call post-edit optimized engines, which are kind of regularly trained, but they're used very heavily, and they can be reset. They can be tuned towards a particular task or for a particular language or a particular user, and then reset. For engines that we have that are independent, so that, let's say, that are not used for post-editing as a use case, they can adapt on the fly and then reset. So it's about cutting the cloth to measure, right? So about doing what kind of makes sense for the purpose, because there's a cost to iterative training as well. It could be a hidden cost in terms of your costs on EC2 or your servers or things like that. And again, it's a question of, is it worth it? Is there any benefit in investing that time and effort? In many cases, the answer will be absolutely no point. In some refined use cases, the answer will be, yeah, you're actually going to squeeze a lot from that.
Mm-hmm. So I have one last question before we open up to everybody. Just a quick one. Maybe this one is for well, I think it's for all of you. We learned a little bit on the side when Konstantin was doing his presentation that we have a quality which is nearly human-like, and if it's not human-like, we can post-edit it. So we have this old the full post-editing, the light post-editing as we used to define it. A basic question for those who have not so much interest or so much insight into that. How much money do you spend less if you go for post-editing, machine translation, post-editing? So you're working on shorter time and you're also working on a smaller budget. Is that true? And what would be the ratio there?
Is that a question for me? So
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
depends on the engine, right? If it's a good engine, you have a big discount, maybe 60% compared to translation, maybe even more, maybe 80%.
Yeah.
If it's a terrible engine, then you shouldn't get any discount because it will just take too much time to edit everything out. The difference between trained and untrained also varies. As a benchmark, use 17%, right? So average, what we see is 17% after training, but it could be twice better or it could be even more. Typically, in some countries which are lower cost, the suppliers agree to work for half the money or for the editing rate compared to translation rate when they post-edit if they use a flat rate discount. But discount schemes and how you kind of monetize better quality machine translation when post-editing is a very hot topic, and there is no single best practice. So this is one of the things that needs to evolve before there is a single benchmark. Let's say the average saving from post-editing is 50%. I would say this. It could be more with a high-quality engine. It could be less if the content is not suitable, if it's creative marketing. If you're trying to machine translate telenovelas, we had a request like this year. Video games are less easy to machine translate, but it's possible. So anywhere across the spectrum.
Good.
Actually, I think that one of the big issues here in pricing, post-editing and machine translated output edits is actually more the way of calculating it. I think the price per word is a bit old school in the general kind of sense of because, you know, first it was sentences. First I think it was pages, and then it was sentences, and then, you know, it was words, because that was what the translation memory, you know, you could be using for. And I think that eventually, the whole business model needs to also change a bit here to again create a transparent and fair way of pricing the job that is getting done by the translators. So it's not a matter of saving 60% or 50%, but rather actually what are the amounts spent of time on the giving task, and then kind of like create a more transparent setup for the customers and for the translators in this matter.
Okay, right. No, you're perfectly right. Philip, can we open to the public and see what questions do we have from the audience?
Yes, the public is now invited to participate in the discussion, so I have given you the possibility to unmute yourself. And otherwise, you can also participate via the chat function, asking your questions or making your points via chat.
So we're open to questions. It's always the same.
We were way too comprehensive with our presentations.
I'm ready to start then.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for your wonderful presentations. I'm a bit old-fashioned, and I think machine translation has done fantastic progress, and there's wonderful results, but it's still not good enough. So I think the engine is the essence, and it depends definitely which engine you are using. And I'm primarily curious to know what you think on how can you, with all respect to these fantastic engines you have, I haven't seen a good machine translation, really, a good quality one, which doesn't need to be post-edited by simple human beings. So what's the next step? How can you make better machine translation before you involve people? Maybe by involving people before you start. And then another little question about differences between translation of general language and of specific domains. If you could say a few words about that. Thank you.
I'll start. It's a very, very provocative opening question. And to be blunt, it's fundamentally wrong that machine translation isn't good enough. You saw the stats from Arthur. There are people translating billions of words a day and using it very effectively. Most of our clients use machine translation, and it's not for a post-editing workflow. It's for a task that's solving a problem to them. I don't speak German, but I can go to Build online and see some article about the Bayern Munich Champions League game tonight, click a translate button, whether it's my own or someone else's, and I can understand that document, and it is absolutely good enough for that. It's like I was at pains to emphasize, it depends on the use case. Absolutely, your experience of machine translation for your particular use case might not be good enough, and that's absolutely valid, and that's your experience. But I think to generally say that machine translation as a technology isn't good enough isn't quite accurate. And if you're using machine translation that's not good enough for you, the question is answered by the likes of us on the call.
Yeah, let me answer with one sentence. Call us.
Very good. Okay.
I agree. Actually, that's what I was going to say to John, because I'd be interested to know what other thing. But if I can give you an example, we see a lot of films that we download, online, and very often they don't have, my native language is Hebrew, and the subtitles are they don't have it, so they use machine translation for that, and it's just not good enough. So is it just because they are not using your wonderful engines, you think? And is that true perhaps for more popular language pairs rather than those that are less resourced?
So the problem there is not an issue of technology. The problem is an issue of the process, and whoever is the provider of that content and the workflow that they used to translate those subtitles for you. If they used some sort of out-of-the-box machine translation for that purpose, then that's not bad machine translation. That's misused machine translation. That's like trying to put the car engine in the Boeing 737 and hoping that it takes off. To continue that painful analogy that I started. Machine translation for subtitling, for transcreation, for advertising, for things like that. It's one of they're the use cases that we often always say, this should not be used for. Similarly, for lots of legal use cases, lots of medical use cases, we say so. I'd encourage you, I'm not sure which platform you were using, but if you look at, for example, what Netflix and Disney Plus are doing in terms of their localization programs, they're some of the most impressive localization processes that exist for subtitling as a task. But the issue here is subtitling as a task and the application of machine translation within it, which sounds like from your experience hasn't been done very effectively.
Okay, that's good. Maybe we take that to a one-to-one talk, Elin and John. That's pretty cool. We have some more questions in the chat. One is from Nanda. I'm just reading it because it's a question for Frederick about content as a service. For what type of content would this be a good fit? Are you now selling testing with specific content types already? So, Frederick.
Thank you. So the way we are working with CAS at the moment, we have invited 3 customers in as beta testers, and we are happy to also take on other customers that would like to be part of our beta program. So in general, what we have done now is that we have chosen specific areas, and here it have been e-commerce companies with thousands of products, where we have focused, for instance, with the Motorola case that I came up with here, and then actually improve towards a specific product. I think the hard part of this here is to control the network, not writing something that's wrong. I think that John probably and Konstantin can imagine the issue here, especially also with fake news. Those kind of engines have been used to actually generate articles that is kind of like completely fictive. So this is something that we have creating a lot of effort into controlling the networks. So in general, to also just add what is a good fit, especially now when we're looking at the MVP, we're looking at smaller text bytes, 50 words, where we kind of like where we get some keywords and where we actually then creates a description of those. So if that is kind of like the case in your end, or looking for, I would love to look into how we can kind of like solve this issue for you in this matter.
Thank you very much. I hope, Nanda, this answers your question. And then I'm coming to Jochen. Jochen, you want to speak out, or shall I read the question?
Please read it.
Okay, Jochen Hummel from Berlin. Can you tell us something about the state of the art of NMT quality estimation? And that might come together with another question from Randy, because he's interested in how terminology is put into NMT and how NMT handles terminology today, which is not sufficient yet, as he says. Maybe this is another question probably for John, if that's okay.
Sure. Jochen, thanks for the question. It's still a very hot topic. It's one of the hot topics, and my guess is the question comes from a position of thinking about the challenge of pricing models when it comes to these type of things. One good thing would be knowing how good the MT is as soon as the words come out of the system to make some sort of real time or on the fly decisions about that. We're still at the point where quality estimation is, think about it like machine translation, right? There's general purpose quality estimation, which would be designed to evaluate the output of any engine or any language. It could be improved if it was refined and trained, if the model was trained to evaluate a particular type of engine. And then there's quality estimation that is inherent to the MT itself, that uses some of the parameters and information that you have from inside the engine to produce a prediction of its quality as it produces the translation. Or there is post quality estimation, where it's, I don't know how Google Translate or Microsoft is working, or Iconic or Systron or whatever. I'm just going to take the output from the MT and try to my best estimate based on some factors that I have of how good this is. So that's kind of where the state of the art is. People are kind of poking around, trying to find the best ways to deploy this. So where the most reliable quality estimation is probably going to come is from an engine itself, as opposed to something that takes the raw output of engines and tries to, like a monolingual estimation task. My concern might be that quality estimation as a task ends up like MT, where it'll never be perfect, and you'll have like it's 80% right 80% of the time, and kind of finding out when it's right and when you have false positives and false negatives. It's still super active. If you keep an eye on our blog, we write about kind of trending topics in MT and quality estimation, rears its head every 5 to 6 weeks, with some new kind of idea as to how it's going.
But John, it seems that currently the approach is to use also trained models to do quality estimation, right? But is that the right approach, that you have one AI judging the other AI?
Well, like I said, it's kind of like I said, right? You kind of have, it's like when you do like pivot MT. So you go from, you want to translate between German and Chinese. So you go from German into English and then English into Chinese. It's kind of potential for compounding of issues, but it's the only way to do it if you want to automate it, right? And I think the most reliable quality estimation will come from, like I said, an engine itself, where so some sort of AI that has access to the decision-making process of the MT engine that allows it to produce some sort of level of confidence. Now you have to trust that the MT engine is telling you the truth as well, like that, because it's like me advocating my own technology, or you saying, yes, of course my translations are good, trust me. But the alternative is some impartial arbiter of quality, which is just based on the output and makes some assumptions, maybe based on the language or the quality of the source document. And I would say that's less reliable, because that's like a human judging the quality of a translation without having seen the source or without knowing how to speak the two languages.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Maybe another thing on how to handle terminology and glossaries, etc., or all those little helpers within MT, within the infrastructure. Likes to answer that. That was a question of Randy. Konstantin?
Right. So the question is, will there be significant improvements to handling terminology, right? DeepL supports terminology in 3 languages out of how many they support now? 23, something like this. Only 3 support a glossary. So yeah, there'll be improvement. With other engines, if you integrate terminology, you see significant improvement. I think just more brands rolling out terminology is definitely what's going to happen, and the way they handle terminology. Improvement will come also to maybe secondary languages. At the moment, the European languages are handled quite well by major engines. If you look at English to German, English to French, English to Spanish, the quality would be pretty uniform. Try going from German to Polish. You arrive at a situation when the scores are much lower, the quality is not so good, so the improvement will also come there.
Thank you. Very good. Okay. Maybe we still have a question or input from Adam, which I think is pretty interesting. Maybe Adam, you want to unmute and speak out?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm obviously very biased, right? Because of Model Front, we offer quality estimation that does not know what the MT was trained on or whatever, right? And both approaches are valid. I think if you look at what Unbabel is doing lately, they lean more towards what John described. But we go the other way, and that's just, we don't have much choice because our clients, you know, they have the MT that they have, and we just have to give it a score. And the main limitation I see with the MT-driven approach is that, you know, sometimes MT just has weird output, and half the time it's because of bad training data, and so that's you know, the MT-based QE is going to reflect that bad training data. And then the other issue is that a lot of people want to compare Google to Microsoft, let's say, or DeepL. And obviously Microsoft is not going to provide a score for Google, and Microsoft is not going to provide a score that says Google is better. And so it just comes down to those use cases. And then the other, if you talk about innovation or what state of the art, I think the massively multilingual thing, we did it slightly before Google announced they did it for translation, because QE is sort of an easier task than translation itself. And again, that was driven by the use cases, the fact that that's the data people have, that's what they want to do. That's the only way for us to make it economical, is to have a massively multilingual model. So that's kind of what I would consider state of the art, and what is maybe under development right now is the whole question of customization. How to give people customized QE models. This is still very much an open question.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So you're thinking on the one hand about a public standard of QE, and on the other hand, on something which is more customizable. Yeah, is there a standard for QE today? And maybe this is the last question, because we're going.
What do you mean by a standard?
Oh, I was just asking, is there already a public or official standard on QE? Probably not.
There is the workshop QE task at the WMT, right, at the main research conference. However, I would consider it a little too researchy.
Okay. What is the opinion of our experts?
Yeah, I mean, where all of this work is happening is in that shared task. I hadn't realized, because I was doing some research for an article that I write in Multilingual magazine. I was looking back how long the shared task on evaluation and quality estimation has been going on, and I hadn't realized it'd been going on for so long. I think the first one on quality, not quality estimation, but just MT evaluation, was back as far as 2008. So it's certainly an active topic. But I mean, I guess the fear or the risk is that, like I said to Jochen, you know, we're tweaking, and where's the plateau, and is there any sort of breakthrough, or does it get to the point where you kind of, I mean, so before neural MT came in, where we were with statistical MT was really going down niches and tweaking and refining before there was a kind of a breakthrough that kind of opened it up again. There'll be a question of whether we're going in the same direction as well.
But actually, it's a very interesting topic, and I will just note it down for another webcast, maybe. If we
just have one comment to the whole kind of quality evaluation of machine translation output and in general output. I think it's it's interesting actually to hear how you can measure it best possible. And when it all comes down, I mean, from the experience of selling translation in general, also human translation, then you can customers come to you and say, this is Google Translate, even though you know it's not Google Translate, but the tone of voice of the output is just not actually meeting the expectations of the customer. And I think that's a bit of the same here when we talk evaluation, quality evaluations, but what are we actually trying to evaluate here? Because in the end, it's a matter of, is it good enough for the customer? And again, as John have mentioned a couple of times, what are kind of like the purpose of for instance, using the raw MT output, and again, what are kind of like the post-editing output and all these kind of things. So I think you need to look at it in a, not if it's correct or not, but rather is it kind of like, is it meeting the customer's expectation or not? And here you can also use, for instance, sentiment and others compared to previous translations they have gone, if the tone of voice and the general kind of like feeling of the text is meeting previous translations. So I think that is something I could be interested to look a bit more into.
Good. Thank you very much for that. Good. If we don't have any more questions, I think we are ready to close our session. We're pretty much on time. Is that good for everybody? And I like to inform you that in 2 weeks, we have another value cast, same time, same frequency on this radio station, dealing with multilingual knowledge management, which is also related to this issue here, this topic here. And I would like to promote that and hopefully I see some of you again the other week. Okay, cool. Philip, you want to close the session?
Well, many thanks, Arthur, for moderating this session, which I found very interesting. I hope participants agree. Many thanks also to our speakers for taking the time to be with us today and to respond to the questions. And yes, as Arthur was saying, we have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks. So you're cordially invited to participate in that one. And otherwise, if you yourself have interesting subjects, we're always on the lookout for new subjects. And if this is the case, please get in touch with me and we might organize something together as well. So having said that, again, thank you to all of you for participating and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you very much. Take care, buddies. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.